Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a rapid-fire executive briefing and a perfect factual review if you've got a sociology midterm coming up. We are unpacking a profound sociological and generational shift in modern American history, the evolution of American attitudes towards same-sex marriage between 2003 and 2013. Whether you're a student or an executive trying to understand how rapidly public consensus can flip, this data is absolutely fascinating.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover a decade of change, the generational divide, widening political gaps, religion and social acceptance, the power of social networks, and finally, looking beyond marriage rights.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, a decade of change, the macro shift. Think back to 2003. Massachusetts was the very first state to legalize same-sex marriage. It was a total outlier on the national map. But fast forward just 10 years to 2013, and 17 states plus the District of Columbia had followed suit. That is a massively rapid legislative transformation in a really short window of time.
And behind those changing laws were changing minds. If we look step by step at the national polling, public support jumped a whopping 21 percentage points over this single decade. We started at just 32% support in 2003, where strong opponents outnumbered strong supporters roughly 4-1. But then, 2011 hits. A historic milestone is reached across multiple polls, majority support. And by 2013, 53% of Americans favored legalization.
When you map out the data from independent national surveys like Gallup, Pew, CNN, and PRI, they all show the exact same upward trajectory. It's striking. We are looking at one of the absolute fastest public opinion shifts ever recorded in modern American history.
Moving on to Section 2, the generational divide. Millennials versus the silent generation.
So the crucial point for our briefing is this stark 32-point generation gap. By 2013, nearly 7 in 10 millennials, that's 69%, favored same-sex marriage. Contrast that with the silent generation, those aged 68 and older at the time, where only 37% felt the same way. Clearly, age is a profound driver in this data.
And this age effect, it is so powerful that it actually creates deep divides within demographic groups that historically oppose same-sex marriage. Take Republicans, for example. Older, silent generation Republicans showed only 18% support, but millennial Republicans, they were at 50%. We see that exact same step-down pattern among white evangelical Protestants, too. The younger members are more than twice as likely to favor same-sex marriage compared to the oldest generation sitting right next to them in the exact same church.
Okay, Section 3, widening political gaps.
Now, even though overall national support grew, the political fault lines actually widened. Back in 2003, the gap in support between Democrats and Republicans was 21 points. By 2013, that gap had expanded to 30 points. Democratic and independent support just surged to solid majorities, but Republican support stayed much lower, hovering around 34%. So we get a much deeper partisan polarization on the issue.
Naturally, these evolving views heavily shaped how the public perceived the parties themselves. By 2013, 70% of Americans saw the Democratic Party as friendly toward LGBT people. On the flip side, 54% viewed the Republican Party as unfriendly. So the policy stances these institutions took were really internalized by the public when forming their overall brand perception.
Let's look at Section 4, religion and social acceptance.
Back in 2003, if you exclude the religiously unaffiliated, almost all major religious groups opposed same-sex marriage. But by 2013, major religious groups had landed on both sides of the issue. You had the unaffiliated, Jewish Americans, white mainline Protestants, and Catholics moving into majority favorability. On the other hand, white evangelicals and black Protestants remained in opposition. The whole landscape shifted from this monolithic block of opposition to a highly fractured, complex reality.
But here's an interesting twist. Internal religious conflict was actually resolving for a lot of Americans. Over that 10-year span, there was an 11-point drop in the percentage of people who felt same-sex marriage went against their religious beliefs. It fell from 62% down to 51%. And this easing of tension, it happened across nearly every single denomination.
All right, Section 5, the power of social networks, the human element.
This human element reveals a really massive shift. In 1993, only 22% of Americans reported having a close friend or family member who was gay or lesbian. By 2013, that number had surged to 65%. Let that sink in. Nearly 2/3 of the country now had a direct personal connection. It completely transformed this from an abstract political debate into a personal familial reality.
The crucial takeaway here is what sociologists call the friends and family effect. The data shows that simply having an LGBT friend or family member correlated with a massive 27-point increase in individual public support for same-sex marriage. And this social contact effect was everywhere, across all major demographic, religious, and political groups. Basically, personal connections were changing minds way faster than any political debate ever could.
Finally, Section 6, Beyond Marriage Rights, the broader implications. Mirroring the marriage trend, we saw a parallel surge in support for allowing gay and lesbian couples to adopt children. In 1999, it sat at 38%. By 2013, it had climbed to 58%, driven heavily by those same millennial and Generation X demographics. More than 2/3 of Americans now believe same-sex couples could be just as good at parenting as heterosexual couples.
Okay, let's do a quick pop quiz right out of a midterm exam to test your knowledge. True or false? In 2013, was it currently illegal under federal law to fire someone simply for being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender? Take a second to think about your answer.
Surprisingly, 75% of Americans incorrectly believed those federal protections already existed. Only 15% correctly knew that in 2013, such discrimination was actually perfectly legal under federal law. It really highlights a massive gap between public perception, what Americans assumed was fair and already on the books, and the actual legal reality at the time.
And that gap in perception leads us straight into what we can call the social bubble effect. People heavily project their own views onto their surroundings. For instance, regular churchgoers in supportive denominations often overestimated opposition in their own churches by a full 20 points. Furthermore, opponents of same-sex marriage overwhelmingly and incorrectly believed the majority of the country agreed with them, completely missing the broader national shift.
Millennials experience this social bubble tension firsthand. Because of that rapid generational shift we talked about earlier, they found themselves navigating a really stark divide. Almost half of them reported that their older family members opposed same-sex marriage, while nearly 60% of their friend groups supported it. They were literally bridging two entirely different cultural worlds right within their own social networks.
To wrap up our explainer today, here is probably the most fascinating paradox in the data. Despite clear majority support in the polling by 2013, only 1/3 of the public actually believed most Americans favored same-sex marriage. The reality had completely shifted, but our collective perception just hadn't caught up yet. Which leaves us with a really big question. In an era of rapid cultural change, how much do our personal social bubbles distort our understanding of the broader culture around us? Thank you for joining this briefing, and remember to always keep questioning the data.